Waiver Wire editions. We're Waiver Wire week 6, 6 weeks into the NFL season. Wild times. Got to talk about our Waiver Wire editions. And this is a week that, much like last week, was a difficult one to prepare for when I'm writing my Waiver Wire article, because there's just so many names. There's been a lot of attrition. There's a lot of like next man in. And I don't need to tell you this. You know it because you look at your roster. Your roster right now, when you're setting your lineup on Sundays, you're not starting all these guys you drafted. A lot of the guys that are in your lineup are guys you picked up off the waiver wire early on in the season. So hopefully you hit on a couple of them. We had a good week last week. We talked about Tank Bigsby being our number one target at the running back position. A lot of other people were recommending guys like Trey Sermon, who had a nice game, but Tank Bigsby looks awesome. And we're going to talk about Tank Bigsby today. But Tank Bigsby, this is sort of like a never give up on a guy after 1 year lesson. And it's funny, we've seen this with the Jacksonville Jaguars franchise multiple times over the years. We recall DJ Shark, who did nothing as a rookie. DJ Shark ends up finishing as a wide receiver 2 in year 2. So it happens. A lot of times we love to see it. We love rookie year production, but Tank Bigsby just looks fantastic right now. And we're going to get to him. Got to talk about the bye weeks, ugly bye weeks. We keep getting these. You get a bye week off though coming up, which is kind of interesting. Week 6 this week, we get Kansas City on a bye. This is one where Travis Kelce's a lock in your lineup. Patrick Mahomes is not really making that much of an impact for you in fantasy football right now. He hasn't had a QB1 weekly finish since week 7 of last year. So Kansas City at the beginning of the year, this looked like a catastrophe. If you were going to have them on a bye week, what a horrible week for you. You can get around it this week in week 6. LA Rams on a bye week. Kyren Williams continues to ball. We should get Cooper Kupp coming back in week 7. We'll see how that goes. We're going to talk about a couple of those LA Rams wide receivers. We're also going to talk about an LA Ram running back a little later in the show. Minnesota Vikings. This is an interesting one. Ty Chandler's the guy we're going to talk about today on the waiver wire. Aaron Jones goes on a bye week with a hip injury. We'll see what happens after that. Obviously, Minnesota is a tough one for you to lose. Justin Jefferson managers just got to get through 1 week. Let's try our best to win this one without Jefferson. When he comes back, he's going to go nuts. Miami Dolphins. This is a good thing. Miami going on a bye is a good thing. Guys need to get healthy, and it's 1 week closer to Tua Tagovailoa. Miami goes from being one of the best offenses in football to being dead last in scoring this year. Ugly, ugly scene in Miami. And then we want to talk about trying to be a week ahead here on waivers. That's sort of like the thing we want to pound into our heads is be a week ahead. So if you have Dallas Cowboys, maybe you have Brandon Aubrey, maybe you have the Dallas Cowboys defense, certainly CeeDee Lamb, Dak Prescott, and Jake Ferguson, all locks in your lineup. Those guys are going to be on a bye in week 7. And then the Chicago Bears offense, they're actually trending up right now. DJ Moore had a smash week last week. Caleb Williams looked a lot better. DeAndre Swift has been playing well. We're going to talk about some Bears a little bit later on the show, but they have a bye week in week 7 as well. And then no bye weeks in week 8. And then only 2 bye weeks in week 9, Pittsburgh and San Francisco. So try to be a week ahead. And my threshold for roster percentage, the guys that I focus on this show, are players that are available in 70% of leagues. I don't usually go too crazy here with the shallow league additions, but we do want to talk about a couple of players who are available in 60% of leagues. And the only player on this list that would have made my top 10 overall list is Josh Downs. And Josh Downs, if he's still available in your league, maybe it's time for you to upgrade the level of competition next year, because Josh Downs, we've been talking about him for weeks, and Josh Downs is out here just balling. Looks fantastic. Another double-digit target week for him. He's still available in 60% of leagues. So wild times. If Josh Downs is available in your league, you have to make it rain fab. And I know you're going to say Theo, but a lot of it was with Joe Flacco. Anthony Richardson, when he comes back, he's a 50% completion rate guy right now. Even if Anthony Richardson comes back, Josh Downs is playing at such a high level, and they're using him in such a way that he would still be a wide receiver 3, a flex, even if Richardson comes back. Now, if Richardson misses a little more time, then Josh Downs is comfortably going to be a wide receiver 2. You rarely see this kind of opportunity on the waiver wire if he's available to you. One other player to keep an eye out for, and again, the next few guys I'm going to talk about would not have made my top 10 overall. Xavier Legette, he was a top 5 addition for me last week. Shoulder injury shortens his week 5. And Legette says that the injury is not serious. It's an AC joint. So shoulder injuries are always funny. So I think Xavier Legette is one that if he is cut in your league, pick him up. But if he's still available in your league, just be a little cautious with how much fab you spent. You don't want to pay for week 3, week 4 production if he's going to have a lingering shoulder problem. We don't know that yet. So again, I'm recording this on Tuesday, so we want to follow the practice reports, see the injury reports with Carolina. Allen Lazard had another week with a lot of targets, continues to get utilized at a high rate. Jets offense has some problems. Garrett Wilson, we see him get a 22 target game, and he still doesn't he puts up a great number for fantasy, but not you automatically win the week. If you have your wide receiver getting 22 targets, it's almost like you feel like you're going to win the week. With this Jets offense, a lot of those 22 targets were uncatchable to Wilson. So Wilson gets career high in targets, but not a career high in points. Just something to keep an eye on. Antonio Gibson, available in almost 40% of leagues. We heard Gibson was going to take over. This seemed like a motivational tactic in retrospect from Jared Mayo. Mayo said Antonio Gibson's going to start the game. We'll mix in both backs, but it's Antonio Gibson now. That led to Ramondre having his second best game of the season. So good for Ramondre Stevenson managers. Hopefully you didn't bench him. I had one league where I benched Ramondre Stevenson because I ended up winning the week, but it was still it's a points league and it's very annoying to do that. But we also learned that we can't completely listen to Gerard Mayo. Let's talk about Cade Otton. Cade Otton, he's caught 16 passes over the last 3 weeks. Baker Mayfield is playing terrific. Kind of lost in the shuffle from last Thursday night's game was Baker Mayfield also played very well. So tight end premium managers, if you're in a 1.5 point PPR format, Cade Otton is a player that should be rostered. So those are just really my shallow league players. Josh Downs, scoop him. He's available, scoop him. Let's talk about players that are available to you in a lot of other leagues. Now, all of these players are rostered in 30% of leagues or fewer. So these are guys who are available in 70% of leagues or more. Every single one of them I'm going to talk about. Some of these players will be available in your leagues. The not in my league, bro managers, there's going to be guys for you on this list. And let's talk about Joe Flacco. Joe Flacco is available 92% of leagues. Could 2024 Joe Flacco be this year's version of 2023 Joe Flacco? I know we said the same thing for Andy Dalton. Andy Dalton started off really, really strong, but let's talk about Flacco. Flacco just was absolutely balling. They lose the game to Jacksonville. It's an absolute shootout, though. So in about a game and a half of football, Flacco's given you 359 passing yards and 3 touchdown passes. I picked him up in a couple super flex formats. I'm happy I did. And this is one where we don't know what's going to happen. I would imagine we get another start out of Flacco. And this is they're going to be a little slower getting Richardson back, get him fully healthy. Flacco is a guy you insert in your lineup in Superflex. And, based on the fact that there's a bunch of buys, Flacco might be in your lineup in a just a single QB format. That's how good he looked. We talked about Downs. He's got Downs. He's got Pittman. He's got Adonai Mitchell. And then Alec Pierce, we'll talk about a little bit later, who's just doing crazy things on a lack of targets, but he's just so explosive. So Flacco's got the weapons. You also have the fact that Indianapolis can't stop anyone. So the game flow situations will be good for Flacco. Daniel Jones. I love talking about Daniel Jones. It makes people so angry when you recommend Daniel Jones on a waiver wire. But Daniel Jones is playing well. New York gets a huge win over Seattle. This was like a big time win. I had Seattle as a defense that I was recommending in my defensive streamers. I had a couple others that hit. We had New England in there. They did well. But Seattle was like a layup defensive one. Like Malik Neighbors out, Devin Singletary out, and Daniel Jones plays really, really well. Daniel Jones leads them to victory. We obviously had Darius Slayton having a nice game, but Jones had 295 combined yards and 2 touchdown passes. This is a player that is quarterback 14 on the season. So we can't completely ignore Daniel Jones anymore. He was terrible last year. Last year, coming off of injury. Last year, the offensive line play was horrific. And New York certainly doesn't have a top 5 offensive line. Don't get it twisted. That's not what I'm saying. But in terms of offensive line play, this is the most improved unit in the NFL this year. One of the most improved units, if somebody wants to get in an argument with me. New York was the second worst offensive line all time last year in terms of sacks allowed. Now they're 17th in sacks allowed this year. So they've gone from being absolutely horrific in terms of allowing quarterback sacks to being average, which is a huge turnaround. You also have had New York with 2 different running backs rush for over 100 yards this season. Last year, from week 12 on, they only had one of them, and that was with Saquon Barkley. So they're more efficient right now in terms of rushing the football, and Daniel Jones is not getting sacked a lot. They don't score enough points that Daniel Jones is going to have some like out of nowhere mid QB1 season. That's not going to happen. But I think he can maintain somewhere in this high end to mid QB2 range. And when you start talking about bye weeks, that's interesting. Also have to factor in that Daniel Jones plays with one of the best wide receivers in football. When Malik Neighbors comes back, there's going to be spike weeks for Neighbors. So Jones definitely is one that I'm looking to scoop up. Probably my favorite quarterback this week on the waiver wire is Daniel Jones. And he doesn't make my top 10, but if you need a quarterback, consider him. Speculators, Drake May. He could take over this week or in the weeks following. Size, big arm, scrambling ability. If you want a speculative addition, this is it. New England is spinning their wheels offensively. They just lost another close one. People are starting to speculate about which game Drake May will make his debut in. I personally would not put Drake May in against the Houston Texans. I would wait and have Drake May go up against Jacksonville in the London game. That's the way I would do it. They have a softer defense. Jacksonville, way less scary in the secondary and on the defensive line. Sort of the way I would play it. When we come back, we're going to dive into running backs, wide receivers, and tight ends that can help you win this week. We're going to go very, very deep today. We're going to cover a ton of names. We'll be right back.
Say what you want about fantasy football. You can't say it's not a game of skill. My favorite game of skill during the NFL season, these underdog pick'em contests. You pick 6, you can win 100x your payout. Just pick a game, one game, just one game. Stack that game. Think week 1, Vikings-Giants. Joe Schoen, he doesn't know what he's doing. I watched Hard Knocks. Daniel Jones is what we thought he was. Less than on Daniel Jones. Less than on Malik Neighbors. Less than on Devin Singletary. And, Sam Darnold, better than advertised. Sam Darnold, more than. Justin Jefferson, more than. Aaron Jones, more than. Boom, 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 boom. 100 extra payout on Underdog right now. Use promo code Underworld. You get a 50% deposit bonus up to $250. So they've raised the maximum bonus from $100 to $125. You put in $250, you get $125 in bonus cash. Who doesn't love that with promo code Underworld? Now go start picking.
Welcome back to Waiver Wired. I'm Theo Gremminger. We're talking about week 6 waiver wire additions. And I'm going to go deep today. And a lot of people say, like, you talk about a lot of guys in your waiver wire show. It's because there's a lot of people listed into this show in very, very deep formats. Some people in dynasty formats, some people in high stakes formats. So we get like a big mix of fantasy football managers. Pay attention to my top 10 overall at the end. We're going to kind of list how I would order these guys. But let's start at the running back position. And this is objectively a very good week for running back additions. So we've got Tank Bigsby, who's available in 77% of leagues. He was a top 5 addition for us last week. I had him in my sleepers show this past week. Make sure you're watching my sleepers show end of the week, checking out the sleepers article. If you enjoyed this show, you're going to really like that one. We dive even deeper and we talk about guys you can use, sort of a waiver wires of the future show as well. People really seem to like that one. But Bigsby was awesome. He was number 1 addition for us to the running back position because we saw how efficient he was as a runner. And when you add those things to the fact that Jacksonville's like been struggling as a team, it kind of made sense to embrace him. And this is a player that looked fantastic. Tank Bigsby now has 3 out of the 4 highest rushing outputs over Jacksonville's last 14 games. Think about that. So 3 out of the 4 highest rushing outputs over the last 14 games for Jacksonville are Tank Bigsby, with all 3 of those coming this year. He goes for 2 touchdowns. He rushes for over 100 yards. He also gets a 28-yard reception. Looked very, very good on that one. So the whole argument that Travis Etienne is going to hold to, and I've seen some smart people on this, people that I think know fantasy, are on the whole argument that we got to tread lightly with Tank Bigsby. Etienne a little bit banged up last week. But at the end of the day, Bigsby looks better. And anybody saying that Bigsby doesn't look better is not watching the games. This guy's explosive. This was a 3rd-round pick in the NFL draft. This isn't some guy off the street. This is a player that the franchise used draft capital on, and he's running better. They also had their best game of the year offensively and their only win of the year offensively with Tank Bigsby shouldering the load. So why can't Tank Bigsby make this into a 60-40 split with Bigsby seeing the 60 and Etienne seeing the 40? I think it's time for Jacksonville to embrace this. Tank Bigsby is my number 1 ad on the waiver wire this week if he's still somehow available in your league. And we've been telling you to add Tank Bigsby since week 1. I know because I added him a bunch of places in week 1. I'm not just saying it. I'm following my own advice here. Bigsby looks awesome. Another running back who looked tremendous is Tyrone Tracy. Again, we get the big win for the Giants against Seattle. Seattle was a favorite in this game. They were supposed to run away with this one. Devin Singletary missed out with an injury. Tracy steps in a significant way. He had 129 rushing yards in a big, big victory for the Giants. So for me, this is like the same argument we're hearing with Etienne, that Singletary is just going to simply come back and take the job away from Tracy. This is one I push back on a little bit as well. Singletary, we've often seen in his career in some sort of a committee. You think back to the Buffalo years. This is a guy that even the beginning of the year last year for Houston, things had to go his way. And Singletary, by all accounts, was fantastic last year over the second half for Houston. But the beginning of the year, it was Dameon Pierce and Singletary. So for me, there's no reason Tracy can't make this a committee. And Tracy looks explosive. Again, converted wide receiver. This is a player with size and athleticism. And Tracy's also an older running back. This is not like a young running back. This is an older rookie. He had that transfer. He went from Iowa to Purdue. So he's been around for a while. So I love Tyrone Tracy as well this week. Jalen Wright, available in 92% of leagues. Devon Achane suffers a concussion. Raheem Mostert played well, but Raheem Mostert has already been banged up this season. This is what we've been waiting for with Jalen Wright. Gives you 13 carries for 86 yards. Looks explosive. Wright has the speed. Wright has the size. The Dolphins traded a 2025 third rounder to get him in the 4th round of this year's NFL draft. So franchise-wise, they like Jalen Wright. Jalen Wright, you're going to get for cheaper than Bigsby, cheaper than Tracy, and he's certainly going to be worth your fab dollars. That's an interesting one. Clyde Edwards-Helaire, he's going to be back soon. Now, we saw Kareem Hunt play well last night, but CEH is one of the most experienced players in this offense. He's available in 89% of leagues. He is worth a speculative, cheap fab bid just to see where it goes. Again, Kansas City, next man in. But we sort of saw what Kansas City did with JuJu Smith-Schuster last night. Like, guys who have familiarity with Mahomes and the offense, they have a leg up right now because of all the attrition. CEH, he might be dust, but he might not be. He's going to be back soon. Ty Chandler, this is another player who makes our overall top 5. Aaron Jones gets knocked out of Minnesota's big win over the Jets in London. Aaron Jones has a hip injury. Now, we don't know the severity of this, and the bye week gives Jones like all this time to get right. But Aaron Jones, Aaron Jones has played tremendous this year. Aaron Jones has had elite usage. The way they're using him is conducive to him finishing as an RB1. Aaron Jones was terrific in the NFL playoffs. So people have this like short-term memory with Aaron Jones. But Aaron Jones also is 29 years old, and Aaron Jones also only played 12 games last year. So Ty Chandler becomes like a priority pickup. You don't get anything out of him this week, but he might be the one that pays off the most. If Ty Chandler gets 8 starts, 5 starts even in this Minnesota offense, he's going to be a player that's really going to help you because of the quality of the Vikings offense. Minnesota also gets back TJ Hawkinson soon, and the Jets gave Darnold all sorts of problems, but the Jets pass defense is nasty. They're allowing the fewest passing yards in the NFL right now. So Minnesota, when they come back, there's going to be a lot of high scoring weeks. Go get yourself some Ty Chandler. Blake Corum makes our overall top 10. And Blake Corum was a guy that was dropped in so many leagues, and it's understandable. He was playing behind Ronnie Rivers, but Blake Corum finally gets in. It looks like Blake Corum is now the handcuff back to Kyren Williams. Kyren Williams has been sensational, but if Corum were to gain any starts, meaning Kyren Williams gets banged up, then Corum would be a guy that's immediately in your lineup. No one gets more running back production out of their RB1 than Sean McVay. It's automatic. And if Blake Corum was the RB1 in this offense, much like Chandler, he'd have a ton of value in the Kyren Williams role. And even if he had an 85% Kyren Williams role with Ronnie Rivers mixing in on some targets or something like that, or a few mix-up carries, Corum would still be the man. So Corum makes our overall top 10 this week. Trey Benson. Trey Benson is now available in 76% of leagues, and he had 50 rushing yards in Arizona's blowout loss to Washington, then doesn't play in the San Francisco win for Arizona. It was a ton of James Conner and some Amari DiMercato. I still believe, and this is one that maybe I'm wrong, but I still believe that if James Conner misses time, you would see a ton of Trey Benson, and DiMercato's role would grow, but it wouldn't be a massive DiMercato opportunity. So I think Trey Benson, this is a perfect time to roster Trey Benson. James Conner's playing great, but James Conner misses time every single year. Keeping it going at the running back position. Let's talk about Emanuel Wilson. Emanuel Wilson, next man in Green Bay. We've talked about him in previous weeks. 87% available. He's the handcuff to Josh Jacobs, at least until Marshawn Lloyd returns. Now, let me give you a list of players. This is 4 guys, and I'm going to list them in order of how I would value them. Ray Davis, available in 92% of leagues. Ty Johnson also getting work for Buffalo. Certain people that I respect believe Ty Johnson would be the next man in. I personally believe if James Cook went down, we'd see the majority go to Ray Davis. So if you disagree with me, just change Ray Davis's name to Ty Johnson. One of the Buffalo backs, then Isaac Guerrero, available in 98% of leagues, then Marshawn Lloyd, who's on the injured reserve, but he's available in 95% of leagues, and Kendre Miller for the New Orleans Saints, available in 93% of leagues. If you have room on your bench, grab one of these guys, throw them on there for a rainy day. It's week 6. Attrition happens year after year. If you have room, have one of these guys. Tyler Algier. Tyler Algier is available in 74% of leagues. This is a player that I don't need to explain to you why you want Tyler Algier. If Bijan Robinson went down, Tyler Algier would be a high-end RB2, if not a low-end RB1. And why do I say that? When you say, Theo, Bijan's only averaging 13 points a game right now, how would Tyler Algier be an automatic RB1 if Bijan went down? Because Bijan is being cannibalized by Tyler Algier and his touches. So Tyler Algier gets the 80 combined yards in week 4. Tyler Algier catches 3 passes last week. So Atlanta puts up this massive number, and Bijan still doesn't score a big one. I think Bijan's going to bounce back. I believe it just because I think he's a very talented player. I don't think he's like not talented and all this kind of stuff. But any way you cut it, Tyler Algier still makes my top 10 overall because of the value he would have in this offense. This offense is ascending. I said some bad things about Zach Robinson earlier in the year. I kind of take him back. We'll see how it goes. Zach Robinson, if you want my full respect, get Bijan Robinson a top 8 running back finish, and then you got it. Talking about Roschon Johnson, also makes my top 10 overall. It's been DeAndre Swift and also Roschon Johnson. Khalil Herbert has been phased out. We don't want to pay for touchdowns. So Roschon gets the 2 rushing scores, but we don't want to go absolutely bonkers for paying for touchdowns here. It's still DeAndre Swift with Roschon getting like 1/3 of the snaps. So it's like 2/3 DeAndre, 1/3 Roschon. But Roschon has 3 touchdowns in 2 weeks. He should be rostered everywhere. This is a player that I have in my top 10 overall. We'll talk about where he lands later. Now, after those guys, there's going to be a huge drop-off. The next names I'm mentioning are only for deep leaguers. So if you don't want to hear about deep league additions, go get yourself a glass of water or something. Dare Ogunbowale, available in 99% of leagues, caught 6 passes for 57 yards. I mention him because he caught 6 passes for 57 yards. Not that he got 15 carries. That was random. But the receiving work is not random. He can catch the football, and Nico Collins is now week to week. We hope Nico gets back, but there's going to be some interesting players in Houston getting targets this week with Nico shelved. Nico was such an important part of that offense. Let's hope he gets back soon. Jeremy McNichols. Brian Robinson didn't play the second half, so Washington's up a ton, and they sit Brian Robinson, who's been banged up. They get him some rest in that second half. The Commanders' offense is rolling like the 6 train in Manhattan right now. McNichols has been scoring for now 2 straight weeks. He saw action in the first half, too. So anybody's going to be like, yo, Theo, it's all garbage time. He got in the first half. McNichols is the number 3 running back in this offense, but he's played so well the last 2 weeks that maybe he's earning a small role. This would actually be a really annoying thing for fantasy managers, where if you have Brian Robinson, you have Austin Eckler, if you start conceding like 5-6 touches a game to Jeremy McNichols because he's playing so well, then that becomes annoying. But if you don't have any Washington Commander and you're in a very deep format, McNichols can be rostered in like an FFPC, NFFC type league, maybe a dynasty league that's super deep. I'll mention Myles Gaskin, available in 100% of leagues. If the Aaron Jones injury turns into a big thing, Ty Chandler becomes the Aaron Jones, and Myles Gaskin would become the Ty Chandler. He would get a few touches a game. We don't need to really talk about him. Ameer Abdullah, available also in 100% of leagues. So we were hoping for a little bit of Dylan Lobby. Lobby was active but didn't play. Abdullah is the clear number 2 back behind Alexander Madison right now. He had 8 touches for 51 yards, and he got a long touchdown run. Deep leaguers only for all of those guys. Okay, come on back. Actually, wait. I got one more gross name to talk about. Trayveon Williams. So, like Zach Moss, there was a slight ankle injury. Probably nothing. And it's probably nothing. But if we hear that Zach Moss is missing practice all week long, maybe it's a little more serious than we thought. Williams is not good, but he's been with Cincinnati for a long time. He would be the backup to Chase Brown. Only if you roster Chase Brown or Zach Moss do you even need to listen to this one. Okay, we're done with the gross names. Now we're on to tight end. So we go from like gross names to boring names, but boring names that can be helpful to you in fantasy. Let's start out with the only tight end that makes my top 10 overall, Tyler Conklin. Tyler Conklin targeted at least 6 times in 3 straight games. So think about that again. For 3 straight games, he's had 6 targets in every single game. This has also coincided with Breece Hall seeing his targets go way down the last 2 weeks. I don't know if that's those things are cannibalizing each other. It's just interesting. So Conklin's targets go up, Breece Hall's targets go down. Certainly not the way I would draw it up if I was the New York Jets offensive coordinator, but I think I maybe no target distribution better than Nathaniel Hackett. But any way you cut it, Aaron Rodgers is passing the ball to Tyler Conklin. He had another solid output, 6 catches for 55 yards. Now, there's going to be people in the chat saying that came in garbage time. I don't know about you, but when my team's in comeback mode, I still get credit for the stats. And Minnesota was a pass funnel defense anyway. So Conklin gets 6 catches for 55 yards. A lot of it was in the second half when the Jets were in comeback mode. But Conklin's usage has increased, and he's a guy where we're not like thrilled to start him, but he's a guy that's going to be somewhere on that high tight end 2 line where during the bye weeks or injuries, he might be helpful to you. We continue to get injuries at the tight end position. David Njoku comes back. David Njoku is now hurt again. Evan Ingram still hasn't come back. So a lot of you are hurting out there at tight end. We got a Colby Parkinson game. And this is one where I overrated Colby Parkinson. Like, I love talking about the things that I get correct. I also like pointing out the things that I got wrong so we can have a discussion on process. But Colby Parkinson, if you recall, looked very good in week 1. I had him in my top 10 overall. We had the loss of Puka Nacua, the chance of Colby Parkinson to take on a greater role. And then it was sort of like a very quiet nothing for Parkinson. So I felt like that was wrong, but I think we were actually just a little bit early. Parkinson now has 7 targets in week 4, and then a career high targets this past game with 13. And a lot of people say, well, the Rams were passing a ton this game, but any way you cut it, a tight end getting 13 targets should not be dismissed. This is Tyler Higbee-esque to get a big, random, high target game. And I think that's something over the second half of the year that Parkinson could hit, where Higbee was sort of a low-end tight end 1, a big tight end. Parkinson has that. He gets tremendous usage. He has 20 targets over the last 2 weeks. Parkinson, much like Conklin, is going to be a high-end tight end 2 when LA returns from their bye week. I prefer Conklin because of the bye week and because of Cooper Kupp coming back, which is going to limit every LA Rams target ceiling, but I still want Parkinson. I have him on a bunch of teams, and I'm happy I have him. Zach Ertz. Zach Ertz did absolutely nothing, but was targeted 8 times. He's available in 70% of leagues. Ben Sinnott, available in close to 100% of leagues. Again, Zach Ertz did nothing, but was targeted 8 times. Could Zach Ertz be breaking down? He's an older player. Could we see Ben Sinnott in the second half of the year? Ben Sinnott, this is a speculative addition. So if you're strong at the tight end position and you want to throw a bid in for Ben Sinnott, you're going to get him for nothing because he's not playing. But Ben Sinnott is a big-time athlete and was a second-round draft pick for Washington. So if Ertz is breaking down, or if Washington wants to start mixing in a potentially explosive younger tight end, Ben Sinnott makes for a fun speculative one. Talk about the Cincinnati tight ends. Mike Gesicki is available in 74% of leagues, but the tight end that I'd like to add in Cincinnati is Eric All, who's available in 97% of leagues. Neither one did anything against Baltimore. I had both of them in my sleepers article, and this is a game where Cincinnati scores 38 points, but Jamar Chase and T. Higgins combine for like 67% of the targets. They go nuts. But Eric All and Mike Gesicki, 2 interesting players, but I think Eric All is taking over. He led the Bengals tight ends in snaps this past week. All is kind of like Sinnott, but All is actually on the field. So All is a very fun speculative ad. Hunter Henry, available in 70% of leagues. His role could change if Drake May takes over at quarterback. So that wraps it up for the tight ends. Let's talk about wide receiver. Wide receiver, really, really fun week. Jalen Tolbert, available in 93% of leagues. He is my favorite addition at the wide receiver position. And and just quick note, JuJu Smith-Schuster, we'll talk about him, didn't make the top 10 because I wrote the article before Monday Night Football. Jalen Tolbert has scored 13 or more PPR points in 3 out of the last 4 games. I'll say that again. Jalen Tolbert Dallas Cowboys, 13 points or more in 3 out of his last 4 games. That's significant. He had his best game as a pro in their win over Pittsburgh on Monday night. A lot of you didn't see it because a lot of you fell asleep because of the delay. But Tolbert played great. He had 10 catches, including a touchdown, finished with 87 receiving yards. And Tolbert's a former 3rd-round draft pick. So the Cowboys drafted him in the 3rd round. This is year 3 for him. He's having like a mini breakout. And the offense is easy to predict right now. CeeDee Lamb, Jake Ferguson, Jalen Tolbert. Michael Wilson, available in 87% of leagues. He's been targeted at least 6 times in 3 straight games. He had a season high in receiving yardage this past week with 78 in Arizona's big win over the 49ers. This is a kind of a gross stat. Michael Wilson has more receptions this year than Marvin Harrison Jr. I don't think it's going to end that way. That's a frustrating thing to hear for us Marvin Harrison Jr. managers, but it speaks to Michael Wilson having a consistent role in this offense, being utilized. It's Trey McBride, it's Marvin Harrison Jr., it's Michael Wilson, it's a ton of James Conner, and Arizona's good offense. Scoop up Michael Wilson. He's a top 10 overall addition this week. Jordan Whittington, another top 10 overall addition this week. We have recommended Jordan Whittington for multiple weeks, and now he's showing why. Caught 7 passes for 89 yards this past weekend. This is 1 week after a 6-catch, 62-yard performance in week 4. Whittington is ascending. Even with Cooper Kupp returning, Whittington is not going to disappear. They like him. He's flat out good. He makes the top 10 again. Alec Pierce. Alec Pierce is available in 80% of leagues. Alec Pierce has 368 receiving yards and 3 touchdown catches on only 13 receptions. He is the ultimate touchdown or bust. Throw a dart at the board. I need a big play. I'm an underdog this week. I'm throwing Alec Pierce in. If Joe Flacco stays at QB, Alec Pierce is interesting. But if Anthony Richardson comes back, we know Alec Pierce had some big games with him. Again, he doesn't make my top 10 because it's really difficult to predict these big plays. But at the end of the day, the big plays are happening with Pierce. He is super athletic, super fast, has the size. Tre Tucker finally had a disappointing week in week 5. Denver's good. That Denver defense is good. Denver's won 3 games in a row. Denver can win 4 games in a row this week against the LA Chargers. Really solid turnaround from Denver. Tre Tucker, disappointment. He had 4 touches on minimal gains. One interesting thing is they gave him 2 more manufactured carries. So they did that last week. He scored a touchdown. This week, he didn't do anything. Played well in weeks 3 and 4. Had touchdowns in both games, and he's not going away. Devontae Adams is going to be traded, most likely. So Tre Tucker, pick him up if he's dropped. Doesn't make my top 10 this week. Jalen Polk, 92% of leagues he's available. Everything is there for Jalen Polk except for actually catching passes and scoring fantasy points. The usage is there. Leads all Patriot wide receivers in snaps and in routes run. Finishes with 6 targets. A quarterback change with Drake May maybe unlocks Jalen Polk. Again, speculative bid. Don't put him in your lineup. But if you want to throw him on your bench and see what happens with Drake May, Jalen Polk was the first NFL draft pick selection that the New England Patriots made after selecting Drake May. So there's a little bit of continuity there. They draft a quarterback in the first round. They draft a wide receiver in the second round. Jalen Polk, I think they want him to be a thing. He also had a touchdown overturned against Miami. So it could have been a more positive discussion right now. Speaking of touchdowns, Rashad Bateman has about a 20% target share, and he catches 4 passes and a touchdown on 8 targets. Could this be a sign of things to come? I don't know. Rashad Bateman has let us down many times in fantasy, but the Ravens like him, and they're not getting consistency out of the tight end position. They're using 3 tight ends. This past week, Lamar Jackson was perfect. Lamar Jackson is probably going to be the QB1 overall, playing at an absurdly high level. 9 touchdown passes to 1 interception while leading the NFL in rushing yardage. So, having pieces of a Lamar Jackson-led offense right now is not the worst strategy. Bateman's not going to cost you much either. But let's see it for 2 weeks in a row before we consider using him in our lineup. Demario Douglas, targeted 9 times, catches 6 of them. He has 9 targets in 2 out of his last 3 games, 16 catches out of the same span. Again, he is a PPR guy in a bad offense who gets some receptions. Demario Douglas doesn't excite me, but you know your fantasy needs. If you need 8 to 10 points to get through the week, Demario Douglas is there. He could give you that. Tutu Atwell. Tutu Atwell, if Cooper Kupp was not coming back, probably would have been higher up here. I think he's the one that suffers a little bit. It could be Whittington that does, but Tutu Atwell, he's played 80% of snaps. He played 80% of snaps, and he tied Jordan Whittington with 10 targets. So over the last 3 games, Atwell has at least 4 catches and at least 58 yards receiving in every single game. And in every single game, he gets a reception of 24 yards or more. So he's giving the Rams sort of like that big play, downfield speed threat. I would guess that he's the one that sees the reduction in snaps when Cooper Kupp returns, just based on the way that Jordan Whittington has looked and his ascension as a rookie. I think it's going to be Kupp, Demarcus Robinson, and Jordan Whittington. But it could be Atwell out there. I just prefer Whittington. If you're in a deep format, though, grab some Atwell if he's still there. Just don't spend too much. Darius Slayton, 97% available. Shameless plug. I had Darius Slayton in my Sleepers article last week. If you read another Sleepers article or you listen to another Sleepers podcast, did the person who write that or talk on the podcast mention Darius Slayton? Okay, maybe come over and make the switch to my article and my show. Shameless plug. I just want to get it in there. Darius Slayton, though, played fantastic. 8 catches, 111 yards, and a touchdown. Obviously, Malik Neighbors, when he comes back, takes over that role. We talked about Daniel Jones, but at the very least, like Darius Slayton, looked good. So at the end of the day, the Giants wide receivers are actually playing well besides Malik Neighbors. Wan'Dale's playing great. Darius Slayton's playing well. This offense is looking like they're going to be okay. They're still only averaging like 18 points a game, but there's some positive signs there with the way Daniel Jones is playing and the fact that they have Malik Neighbors. Deep leaguers, Jalen Coker. Jalen Coker, this is a player that I have on a very deep dynasty roster. And I'll say a big shout out to Cody Carpentier, who might be listening to the show. Cody Carpentier has always been a big Jalen Coker fan. Jalen Coker, for anybody who's a fan of the NFL draft, the NFL Combine, played at Holy Cross, but made the NFL Combine out of Holy Cross, which is like in itself a big thing. Like I can't imagine there's been too many Holy Cross NFL Combine participants over the last 50 years. So Coker gets there. He's got speed, doesn't get drafted, but he gets kept on Carolina. Then we see Legette leave the game, and Coker is on the field in 3 wide receiver sets. Catches 4 passes for 68 yards. Very deep leaguers can consider adding Jalen Coker. If not, ignore him. If you're in a dynasty league, maybe consider adding him. You're never going to get back that 30 seconds on Jalen Coker. But this player is super exciting. Xavier Hutchinson. Xavier Hutchinson is available in 100% of leagues. Xavier Hutchinson is looking like the next man in for Nico Collins. Now, obviously, the target distribution is going to be different because you have guys like Stephon Diggs. You have guys like Tank Dell who are going to see an increased target share with Nico Collins out. But in terms of actually being on the field, Xavier Hutchinson should be on the field in 3 wide receiver sets. And why is this so exciting? Because Xavier Hutchinson is going to be given the opportunity in similar fashion to what we saw with Noah Brown last year. So Noah Brown, anybody who is a waiver wire enthusiast or watches my shows, listens to my stuff, we talked about Noah Brown last year and he smashed. You get the opportunity to play with CJ Stroud in this Bobby Slowick offense. Occasionally, they're just going to feed the man with the strong matchup. And Xavier Hutchinson was a good enough player inside the organization that he allowed the Texans to move on from Noah Brown this offseason. So Noah Brown played great last year, gave us like 3 wide receiver 1 weeks, and they cut him because they want to get Xavier Hutchinson into the depth chart. Hutchinson was a 7th round pick in the 2023 NFL draft. So 7th rounder with Houston, doesn't do anything as a rookie, and now gets this opportunity potentially in year 2. We'll see what he's about. but there will be leagues where I will be bidding for Xavier Hutchinson. Now we got to talk about JuJu Smith-Schuster. JuJu Smith-Schuster steps in and has his first 100-yard performance since 2022, the middle of the year 2022. So JuJu was basically doing a lot of the Rashee Rice routes. I don't know how sustainable this will be, but JuJu, if he's available in one of your leagues, is definitely worth a pickup. This is a player that, again, didn't make my top 10 overall because I wrote the article and came up with the top 10 before I recorded this. But JuJu is a player that looked really good. He had the potential touchdown also bounce off of him, and the Saints picked it off in the end zone. So the stat line could have been even higher. But the funny thing about JuJu Smith-Schuster is he's only 27 years old. So obviously we saw the big decline, but he still had an 88-catch season attached to Mahomes when he was in Kansas City. Goes to New England, doesn't do anything, and the Chiefs sign him for like $1 million in late August. And we don't think anything of it. But it just goes to show you smart franchises do smart things. JuJu looked really, really good last night. So let's talk about the top 10 overall additions. Top 10 overall. Tank Bigsby, number 1. Easy. Tyrone Tracy, number 2. Ty Chandler, number 3. Jalen Wright, number 4. Roschon Johnson, number 5. 5 straight running backs to start our top 10. This is a running back week. Jalen Tolbert at number 6, our first wide receiver. Blake Corum at number 7. If we see Tyrone Williams go down, Blake Corums would be a massive value for your fantasy team. Jordan Whittington at number 8. Tyler Algier at number 9. Number 10, Michael Wilson. And it tied at number 10, Tyler Conklin. Again, one more time. Tank Bigsby at 1. Tyrone Tracy at 2. Ty Chandler at 3. Jalen Wright at 4. Roschon Johnson at 5. Jalen Tolbert at 6. Blake Corum at 7. Jordan Whittington at 8. Tyler Algier at 9. Michael Wilson at 10. Tyler Conklin tied at 10. I'm Theo Gremminger for Player Profiler. Make sure you're checking out my Fantasy Football Sleepers video and podcast, Sleepers, Streamers, and Stashes at the end of the week, every week. Press coverage, I'm having John Hansen of Fantasy Points, the Fantasy Guru, on. I'm also recording with Scott Barrett every single week over on the Fantasy Points channel, School of Scott. Go ahead and subscribe to School of Scott as well. And stick with us here. We're going to crush it every week here on the Waiver Wire, and we're going to look to help you win your league this season. And let's get it. You know, this is the time to win. I'm sure you got some teams that started off slowly, but you say this roster is strong. This is the time to do it. Let's go sweep the rest of October. Let's get those W's.
Hey, I want to take a moment to thank you for tuning in. It's important to me that all of our media be free. This is only possible because of you allowing a true independent sports media enterprise to thrive unlike any other in the business. So please subscribe to the All-In Package to continue to make all of this possible, to ensure that all of our stats, information, data, content is available to you, especially you, the people that get the site and get the show.